Respect must never be optional, and the incident inside that supermarket made this truth undeniable. When the elderly black woman approached the register and pointed out the error on her bill, she did not raise her voice or cause a scene. She only wanted clarity and fairness. But the man called to handle the situation, the store manager, carried himself as though respect was something he could choose to give or withhold. His words were curt, dismissive, and laced with impatience. To him, she was just another customer slowing down the flow of the line, another problem to brush off. In that moment, he made the critical mistake of forgetting that every person who walks through those doors deserves basic human dignity, regardless of age, race, or circumstance. What followed only magnified how far he had strayed from the principles of decency. When he raised his hand and slapped her, he revealed the complete absence of respect. Not just for her as a customer, but for her humanity. People who witnessed it did not see a man managing a store. They saw someone abusing his authority and betraying the trust of his position. It was an act that stripped him of credibility in an instant. The customers who stood frozen in disbelief did not look at him as a leader anymore. They looked at him as a warning sign of what happens when respect is treated as optional. The woman, on the other hand, showed how powerful respect can be when it is lived and upheld. Even after being struck, she did not lash out or escalate the confrontation. She stood still, her calm voice carrying more authority than his shouting ever could. When she told him that he had just made the last decision he would ever make in that store, the weight of her words silenced everyone around. She had been disrespected in the most public and humiliating way, but she chose not to respond with the same cruelty. Instead, she allowed her actions to speak louder, revealing herself as the silent owner of the very supermarket he thought he controlled. In less than 2 minutes, the situation flipped entirely. The man who had slapped her was stripped of power, and she, the woman he tried to belittle, demonstrated true leadership by ensuring accountability. His dismissal, along with the entire management team, sent a clear message. Respect is not a suggestion, it is a requirement. Employees in the store, many of whom had quietly endured his dismissive attitude for months, felt an unspoken sense of justice. Some of them had probably wondered if anyone would ever notice the way he disregarded both staff and customers. Now, in front of everyone, it became clear that no act of disrespect goes unseen forever. The story spread quickly, because people understood the universal lesson it carried. The manager had treated respect as a choice, something he could grant when it suited him and withhold when it did not. But in the end, his lack of respect cost him everything. Customers remembered his actions, employees remembered his downfall, and the supermarket as a whole was reshaped by the reminder that businesses cannot survive without respect at their core. What made it even more striking was how preventable it all was. If he had simply taken a moment to listen to her, to review the receipt and address her concern with patience, none of it would have happened. A few kind words could have resolved the matter in seconds. Instead, he chose arrogance and aggression, which revealed his true character in front of everyone. That choice exposed not just his unfitness to manage a store, but his inability to grasp the simplest truth: every person deserves to be treated with dignity. The difference between the woman and the manager highlighted what respect really means. He believed his authority allowed him to belittle others, but her authority came from treating people with fairness and integrity, even when she was wronged. His downfall was not just about one slap. It was about years of neglecting respect in his leadership, until finally the cost came due. Through her actions, the woman proved that respect is not negotiable. It is the foundation of trust, the backbone of service, and the clearest indicator of true leadership. The man who thought he was in control lost everything because he treated respect like an option. She, who carried herself with dignity even in the face of insult, showed everyone that respect is the strongest power of all. Abuse of power has immediate consequences, and the store manager learned that lesson in the harshest way possible. When he was first called over to address the pricing issue brought up by the black elderly woman, he stood there with the air of someone who thought his position made him untouchable. He didn't see a simple matter of customer service. He saw an opportunity to exert control, to assert himself over someone he assumed was powerless. The way he dismissed her concern showed that he believed authority gave him the right to disregard her. But the truth about power is that it is never absolute, and the misuse of it always invites a reckoning. His arrogance blinded him to that reality, until it was too late. The slap was more than just a physical act. It was a display of unchecked ego, an attempt to remind her and everyone around him who he thought held control in that store. Customers gasped. Employees froze, and the silence that followed was the sound of authority collapsing. In those few seconds, the illusion he had built as a leader shattered before their eyes. Instead of seeing a manager maintaining order, everyone saw a man so insecure in his position that he resorted to violence against an elderly woman to reinforce it. That single decision became the nail in the coffin for his career. What he did not know was that the woman he struck had far more power than he could ever imagine. She did not shout or retaliate in anger. She looked at him with calm certainty and made it clear that his abuse of power would cost him everything. Within 2 minutes, her phone call ended his reign in that store, dissolving the management team that had enabled his behavior. His downfall was swift because abusive power cannot go unanswered forever. The moment he crossed the line, his authority became worthless. Asterisk for the employees who had watched him belittle staff and dismiss customers before. His firing was not just a punishment, it was a long overdue correction. Many of them had likely kept quiet, fearing retaliation if they spoke against him. Abusive power often thrives in silence, feeding off the idea that no one will intervene. But the moment his actions became visible to everyone, silence was no longer possible. The consequences came quickly, and they came publicly. The slap he delivered in arrogance turned into the very thing that exposed him. Asterisk. The speed of his downfall shows how fragile authority becomes when it is abused. He might have believed that his title as manager gave him control over people, but titles are temporary. Respect and integrity are what sustain leadership, and without those, power collapses at the first test. The elderly woman reminded him, and everyone else in that store, that authority is not about intimidation or control, it is about responsibility. He failed that responsibility, and in less time than it took for customers to process what they had witnessed, he was removed. Asterisk. The scene also revealed how abuse of power damages more than just the person it targets. When he struck the woman, the entire atmosphere of the store changed. Customers no longer felt safe, employees no longer felt supported, and the business itself was tainted by the act. Abuse spreads distrust like wildfire, and it undermines every relationship an organization relies on. His action was not a private mistake. It was a public disgrace, one that threatened the reputation of the entire supermarket chain. That is why the woman, as the owner, had no choice but to act swiftly and decisively. Asterisk. His downfall teaches that authority is never a shield against accountability. In fact, the higher the position, the greater the consequences when power is misused. The manager may have thought his actions would be overlooked or excused, but leadership amplifies responsibility, not diminishes it. By slapping a customer, especially one elderly and vulnerable, he did not just break trust, he destroyed the very foundation of his role. Asterisk. The aftermath became a stark reminder to everyone present that abuse of power leaves no room for recovery. It may provide a fleeting sense of control, but it always carries a price. And often that price is everything the abuser thought they had secured. The woman's calm but firm response ensured that justice was immediate. His career ended not with a quiet dismissal, but with a lesson etched into the memory of every witness. Authority must be wielded with integrity, because the moment it is abused, consequences arrive faster than anyone expects. True leadership reveals itself in action. And that became unmistakably clear in the way the situation unfolded inside the supermarket. The store manager had a chance to show leadership when the elderly black woman pointed out the discrepancy on her receipt. That was the moment for him to step in, listen carefully, and resolve the issue with patience. But instead of rising to the occasion, he revealed the hollowness of his role. His response was rushed, dismissive, and meant to silence rather than serve. Leadership is never about brushing people aside, but that is exactly what he did. His behavior was not the mark of a leader, but of someone who relied solely on his title to command respect. Asterisk. When he raised his hand and struck her, any illusion of leadership vanished. No true leader resorts to violence when faced with a challenge, especially not against an elderly woman. His actions showed that he had no real control over himself, let alone the responsibility of guiding others. Leadership is tested in moments of difficulty, when tensions rise and patience wears thin. He failed that test in front of everyone, revealing himself not as a leader, but as a man consumed by arrogance and insecurity. Asterisk. The woman, however, demonstrated what leadership truly looks like. She had just been humiliated in public, struck in a place where she should have been treated with the highest level of care and respect. Yet she stood calmly, her dignity intact, and chose her words carefully. When she told him that this would be the last decision he would ever make in the store, she spoke not from anger, but from clarity and authority. Leadership is about holding others accountable, and in that moment, she embodied it with complete composure. Asterisk. Her decision to fire not just him, but the entire management team within minutes, was a bold act of leadership. She did not delay or second-guess the consequences of his abuse. She recognized that his behavior was not an isolated event, but a symptom of a larger failure in the culture of that store. By removing the entire management team, she made it clear that leadership is about setting standards, not making excuses. Her swift action sent a message to employees and customers alike, that respect, fairness, and responsibility would be the new foundation of the supermarket. Asterisk. The contrast between him and her could not have been clearer. He thought leadership was about exerting power, intimidating others, and showing dominance. She showed that leadership is about integrity, responsibility, and decisive action. While he lost control in a moment of anger, she gained control by refusing to let that act define her. Leadership does not require force, it requires vision and the courage to make difficult decisions when others hesitate. Asterisk. For the employees who had suffered under his management, the difference was undeniable. Many of them had likely seen his temper before, felt the weight of his dismissive attitude, and endured his lack of respect. But no one had dared to challenge him directly, because they believed his title made him untouchable. It took her leadership to prove that no position protects someone from accountability. By acting decisively, she restored not only order, but also trust. Employees could finally believe that their workplace would be safe, fair, and guided by principles instead of fear. Asterisk leadership is also about the impression it leaves behind, and her actions left a lasting mark. Customers who witnessed the scene walked away, not just shocked by what had happened, but impressed by the way she handled it. She could have chosen to walk away quietly or deal with the matter privately, but she made the choice to act openly, ensuring that everyone understood the values she expected in her business. That transparency is what set her apart as a true leader. Asterisk the manager, on the other hand, left behind a legacy of failure. His name would be remembered not for managing a store, but for the moment he lost his authority through his own actions. He showed employees what leadership is not, and in doing so, made her demonstration of leadership shine even brighter. His downfall became her platform to redefine what it means to lead. Asterisk true leadership is never about titles or authority alone. It is about the choices made when tested, the actions taken when others are watching, and the standards set for those who follow. The store manager thought his position was enough to make him a leader, but his actions proved otherwise. The elderly woman, with her calm but firm response, showed everyone that leadership is proven not by words or rank, but by action. Justice can arrive unexpectedly, and that truth became painfully clear to the store manager who believed he was untouchable. When he walked up to the register to deal with the elderly black woman's complaint, he saw her as a nuisance, someone who did not deserve his time or patience. In his mind, he had authority, and authority gave him the freedom to act as he pleased. He never imagined that the very person he disrespected would hold more power than he could dream of. He thought justice was something distant, something slow, something that would never catch up to him. But justice, in that store, came within minutes, and it struck with a force that ended his career instantly. Asterisk. The slap he delivered was not only shocking, it was a reckless gamble that exposed his true character. For months, perhaps years, he may have gotten away with smaller acts of disrespect, comments tossed at employees, or dismissive gestures toward customers. Those small abuses built up silently, tolerated because no one dared to challenge him. But justice has a way of waiting for the right moment to appear, and when it did, it arrived faster than he could process. The very moment his hand struck her face was the moment he wrote the ending to his own story in that store. Asterisk. The irony was that he thought he was in control. By slapping her, he believed he was asserting dominance, proving to everyone that he was the authority not to be questioned. But instead, that act turned the spotlight on him in the worst possible way. Customers stared in disbelief, employees whispered to each other, and the store itself became a stage for his downfall. He did not know who she was, but she knew exactly who he was. A man who had mistaken cruelty for strength. Justice arrived disguised as a quiet, elderly woman with the power to remove him and everyone around him in a matter of minutes. Asterisk. Her calm response was part of that justice. She did not scream or retaliate in anger, though she had every right to. Instead, she let silence and certainty do the work. When she told him that this was the last decision he would ever make in the store, the weight of her words carried the justice he never thought would touch him. 2 minutes later, the phone call she made erased his authority, his position, and his career. Justice didn't crawl in. Slowly it came down on him with swiftness and finality. Asterisk. The people watching learned something important that day. They saw how quickly the balance of power can change, how the arrogant can fall without warning, and how those who appear vulnerable can turn out to be the strongest in the room. For the employees, it was more than just relief. It was proof that justice, though sometimes delayed, always finds its way. Many of them had endured his heavy-handed management style, his disregard for their opinions, and his constant need to remind them of his authority. But in less than 5 minutes, all of that was gone. The man who had believed himself untouchable was suddenly stripped of everything. Asterisk. Justice also reached beyond him personally. By firing the entire management team, she ensured that the culture which allowed him to act so freely would not survive. It was not just about punishing him, it was about cleansing the entire system that had given him room to behave that way. The store's new chapter began not with fear or arrogance, but with accountability and fairness. That is what true justice looks like. Not only removing the offender, but also addressing the environment that let the offense happen. Asterisk. His downfall was unforgettable because it happened in the most public way possible. The same customers he had dismissed before, the same employees he had looked down on, were there to witness his end. Justice, in that moment, was not hidden behind closed doors. It was visible to all, and it left a lasting impression. People walked away from that store with a story that would be retold, one that reminded them that arrogance and abuse never go unpunished forever. Asterisk. The manager likely thought that justice, if it ever came for him, would take years or might never happen at all. He thought his position insulated him, that he could act without consequence. But justice arrived in less time than it takes to finish a conversation. It showed him, and everyone else, that consequences do not always wait for the future, they can appear suddenly. decisively, and in ways no one expects. The very woman he tried to demean was the one who brought it down upon him. Justice was not delayed. Justice was immediate, and it left him with nothing but the memory of how quickly everything he relied on slipped from his grasp. What unfolded inside that supermarket was more than just an incident between a manager and a customer. It was a reminder of the principles that hold every workplace, every community, and every relationship together. The manager believed his authority gave him the freedom to dismiss, belittle, and even harm those who questioned him. His decision to slap an elderly black woman exposed the reality of his character, a man who mistook power for leadership and arrogance for strength. But what he did not anticipate was that the person he thought was powerless would turn out to be the very one who could decide his fate. The speed at which everything changed was what left such a lasting impression. In less than 2 minutes, his role, his authority, and his career collapsed. Justice did not arrive as a slow process. It came swiftly, with finality, and in a way that everyone present could witness. That swiftness carried a powerful message. No matter how long someone has gotten away with mistreating others, the moment of reckoning can come suddenly, without warning, and leave no room for recovery. His downfall was not quiet, nor was it private. It happened in front of employees, customers, and strangers, ensuring that the lesson would echo far beyond the walls of that store. The woman's calm and measured response was just as significant as his downfall. She did not meet violence with violence or disrespect with disrespect. Instead, she used authority responsibly, showing what true leadership looks like. By removing him and the entire management team, she sent a message that accountability is not negotiable. It was not enough to punish one person while leaving the culture that enabled him intact. Justice demanded more, and she delivered it without hesitation. Her actions reminded everyone that leadership is not about domination, it is about integrity, fairness, and the courage to act when others are watching. For the employees, it was a moment of vindication. Many of them had likely endured his dismissive behavior, waiting for the day when someone would finally step in. For the customers, it was proof that businesses built on disrespect cannot last. And for the manager himself, it was the realization that everything he thought he controlled could vanish in an instant. His title could not save him, his authority could not protect him, and his arrogance only accelerated his fall. The story of that day lives on because it carries universal truths. Respect is not optional. Power without integrity is fragile. Leadership is proven in action, not in titles. And justice, though it may seem far away, often arrives when it is least expected, leaving no doubt about its purpose. The supermarket became more than a place of commerce. That diet became a stage where arrogance was defeated by dignity, and abuse was crushed by accountability. The lesson remains simple but unforgettable. Those who abuse power will always fall, and those who carry themselves with respect